Sometimes when you've lost everything, the only direction left is forward. Thomas Brennan understood this truth on a cold November morning in Baltimore, staring at the stack of rejection letters that had become his morning ritual. The studio apartment smelled of stale coffee and regret. Whiskey bottles lined the counter, like silent judges, their empty verdict already delivered. Tom was 62 years old, and he looked older. The mirror showed a face carved by decades of outdoor work, tan skin, now gone gray hair that had surrendered to silver years ago. His hands shook as he poured coffee, the tremor of a man who had made peace with the bottle and paid the price. On the kitchen table, a notice screamed in red letters, "Final foreclosure warning." He had 30 days before the bank took the last place he could call home. 3 months since his last construction job. 18 months since Margaret lost her battle with Alzheimer's. Her final years a cruel fade into confusion and fear. Tom had watched the woman he loved forget his name, forget their daughter, forget everything except the terror in her eyes when she looked at familiar rooms turned foreign. The wedding ring sat in his pocket, a talisman he couldn't bear to remove but couldn't stand to see. His phone buzzed. Sarah's name lit the screen, and Tom's finger hovered over the answer button before letting it go to voicemail. His daughter, 38 years old now, living in Seattle with two kids he'd never met. Emma, 12. Lucas, 9. Numbers on a screen, voices in occasional messages, ghosts of a relationship he'd destroyed through absence and alcohol. The voicemail notification appeared. Tom played it, Sarah's voice filling the empty apartment. "Dad, it's me. I know you won't pick up. You never do. But Emma's doing a school project on family history, and she asked about you yesterday, about what you did in the Navy. I told her I'd try to find out. So if you want to talk, call me back." Tom replayed it 3 times, memorizing the cadence, the careful distance in her tone. She'd learned not to hope for more than he could give. That knowledge sat in his chest like a stone. The newspaper lay on the table, employment section already circled and crossed out. Construction worker needed, must have own tools. His tools had been sold 3 months ago to pay for Margaret's final hospital bills. Experience foreman references required. His references came from companies that no longer existed, contracts abandoned, when he'd chosen whiskey over work. Then his eye caught a small notice tucked between ads for used furniture and scrap metal collection. Baltimore Harbor Authority, abandoned vessel available for salvage, maritime experience preferred, small filing fee. Contact Rodriguez at extension 447. Ships. Tom's fingers traced the words. He'd spent 4 years in the Navy, 1979 to 1983, working as a welder on auxiliary vessels. The smell of diesel fuel and salt water, the rhythm of engines, the satisfaction of a perfect seam joining metal to metal. Those were the years before everything went wrong, before the night that carved a scar down his right forearm and left another across his soul. Margaret's voice echoed in memory. "You were happiest when you were working with your hands on ships. When you came home, smelling like the ocean." Tom tore the notice from the paper and tucked it in his pocket next to the wedding ring. The Veterans Affairs Hospital occupied a gray building on the east side of Baltimore, its waiting room a museum of American wars. Vietnam vets with haunted eyes sat next to Gulf War soldiers missing limbs, Afghanistan veterans too young to have seen so much. Tom checked in for his monthly appointment, taking a seat next to an old man reading a newspaper with hands that trembled worse than his own. "You Navy?" the man asked without looking up. 1979 to 83. Auxiliary Fleet. Mekong River Patrol, 68 to 70. The man folded his paper. Different wars, same nightmares. They sat in understanding silence. Some things didn't need words. Dr. Patel called Tom back, a sharp-eyed physician who'd seen too many veterans circle the drain. He reviewed Tom's chart with the expression of a man reading an obituary before it was published. "Your liver enzymes are concerning, Tom. You need to stop drinking." "I'm trying." "You said that last month, and the month before." Patel leaned forward. "You're 62. If you take care of yourself, you might have 10, 15 good years left. Keep drinking like this, you'll be dead at 6 months. Maybe less." "Doc, I appreciate the concern, but I know my limits." "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you've already exceeded them." Patel's voice softened. "What are you living for, Tom?" The question hung in the sterile air. Tom had no answer. "Find something worth living for," Patel continued, "before it's too late. before you become another statistic in my files. Tom left the hospital with prescriptions he wouldn't fill and advice he wouldn't follow. The harbor notice burned in his pocket like a coal warm with possibility or delusion. He couldn't tell which. O'Malley's Tavern sat 3 blocks from the harbor, a working-class bar that had survived gentrification through sheer stubbornness. Danny the bartender knew Tom's order before he sat down. Whiskey neat, no ice, no conversation unless Tom initiated it. Today, Tom slid the harbor notice across the scarred wood. "What do you think?" Danny picked it up, reading with the skepticism of a man who'd heard too many drunk dreams. "You're thinking about buying a ship with what money?" "Filing fees only $300, says the vessel is free to qualified applicants. If it's free, there's a reason nobody wants it. You know how much it costs to scrap a ship, tens of thousands, maybe more. I know ships. Worked on them 30 years. Worked on them when you were young. You're 62 now, Tom. That's a different game. What else am I going to do, sit here drinking myself to death?" Danny had no answer to that because they both knew it was true. Tom was circling the drain, and everyone could see it except him. Or maybe he could see it perfectly, and that was the problem. The door opened, bringing cold November air and a figure Tom hadn't seen in 5 years. Walter Pike moved like a man who'd spent his life in hostile territory, alert even in a neighborhood bar. 78 years old, but still carrying himself like the Navy SEAL he'd been 40 years ago. Silver hair and a crew-cut lean frame, a slight limp from an old injury that didn't slow him down. "Walt," Tom's voice cracked with surprise. Walter's eyes found Tom, and something passed between them. Recognition, memory, shared ghosts. "Heard you were still drinking here." Walter took the stool beside Tom without asking. "Thought I'd check on an old shipmate." They hadn't spoken since Margaret's funeral, where Walter had appeared in full-dress uniform to pay respects. Before that, it had been years. Some friendships survived through silence, understanding that words would only open wounds better left sealed. "You look like hell, Tom." "Feel like it too." Walter's gaze fell on the harbor notice. His face changed, going still in the way that meant his mind was calculating angles, assessing risks, planning 3 moves ahead. "Avalon Dawn, you thinking about claiming her?" "You know the ship?" Walter's jaw tightened. "Yeah, I know her. She used to be called Meridian Star." The room tilted. Tom's hands gripped the bar-edged knuckles white. "That was the ship, the one where it happened. October 15th, 1983, Walter confirmed. The night they killed Captain Morrison and 34 crew members. The night you and I were the only ones who got out alive. They moved to a back booth, the kind of private space where old soldiers told truths they'd buried for decades." Walter ordered coffee, not alcohol. He'd been sober 5 years, a fact Tom had learned at the funeral and promptly forgotten. "You never told anyone, did you?" Walter asked, "about what really happened that night?" "I signed the NDA. I was scared. I was 21 years old." "Fear's got nothing to do with age, Tom. I was 36 and just as terrified." Walter's eyes went distant, seeing things Tom wished he could forget. Meridian Star was Navy Auxiliary classified mission. Crew of 37 for what should have been a simple cargo run. But it wasn't cargo we were carrying. "Viktor Petrov," Tom whispered. "Soviet diplomat. Defecting with intelligence the CIA said could change the balance of the Cold War. I was senior diver, part of the security detail. You were just a welder, 21 years old, didn't know what we were really doing out there." The memories came flooding back. Tom had spent 40 years pushing them down, drowning them in whiskey, but they'd never really left. They'd just been waiting. October 15th, 1983. Tom had been in the engine room welding repairs to the auxiliary fuel tank. Routine work, the kind he could do with his eyes closed. Then the intercom crackled. Captain Morrison's voice calm but urgent. "All hands, we are under attack. This is not a drill. Repeat, we are under..." The transmission cut off. Gunfire echoed through the ship's hull, a sound Tom had never heard outside training exercises. Screaming, running footsteps. More gunfire. Tom had grabbed his wrench, the only weapon available, and started for the ladder. Then he heard boots on the metal stairs. Heavy, deliberate military. Not American military. Something else. He'd hidden behind the fuel tank, his 21-year-old heart hammering, watching through a gap as Soviet commandos swept through the engine room. Spetsnaz, he would learn later. The best killers the USSR had to offer. They found two sailors trying to hide, executed them with precision headshots. Tom had pressed his hand over his mouth to keep from crying out tasting blood where he'd bitten through his lip. Then they found the real target. Viktor Petrov had been hiding in a maintenance compartment, a space so small Mo hadn't known it existed. The Russian diplomat was 40 years old, balding, wearing a suit that looked wrong on a cargo ship. In his hands, he clutched a leather diplomatic pouch. The Spetsnaz commander spoke in Russian. Petrov responded in the same language, his voice shaking. The conversation lasted maybe 30 seconds. Then the commander raised his pistol. Petrov's last words were in English, meant for ears that would never hear them. "Tell my daughter I love her. Tell Anna her papa was trying to make the world better." The gunshot echoed. Petrov fell. The commando searched his body, took the diplomatic pouch, and left him bleeding out on the engine room floor. Tom had stayed hidden for 2 hours. When silence finally came, he'd crawled out to find Petrov's body, the man's eyes still open, still searching for something he'd never see. "You could have helped him," Tom said now. 43 years later, the guilt fresh as the day it happened. "I was right there. I could have—" "You would have died," Walter interrupted. "They were professional soldiers. You were a kid with a wrench. What were you supposed to do?" "Something. Anything." Walter's hand gripped Tom's shoulder. "You survived. That's not nothing. And you're about to do something now." "What are you talking about?" "Tom, I didn't come here by accident. I've been tracking the Avalon Dawn for 43 years, waiting for her to be available again. Because I think Petrov hid something on that ship. Something even the Soviets didn't find. Evidence that could finally tell the truth about what happened." Tom stared at his old friend. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I'm 78 years old. I can't do this alone, and because you were there, you saw Petrov die. You owe him the truth, same as me. I owe him more than I can ever repay. Then help me repay it. Claim that ship. Find what Petrov hid. Make sure his daughter knows her father was a hero." Tom went home but didn't sleep. He stood in his apartment looking at Margaret's photo. For the first time in 18 months, he'd turned it face up instead of hiding it face down. Her smile looked out at him, the woman who'd believed he could be better than he was. "What do you think, Maggie?" he whispered to the silence. "Am I crazy?" Her voice came back in memory. "You're a good man, Thomas Brennan. You just forgot how to be." He thought about Sarah and the grandchildren he'd never met. Emma doing a school project about family history. Lucas, a name attached to a 9-year-old boy he couldn't picture. What legacy was he leaving them? A drunk grandfather who died alone in a foreclosed apartment, or maybe something more. Tom counted his savings. $347 in checking. Mortgage payment due in 2 weeks, $800 he didn't have. The choice was simple and terrible. Pay the filing fee for the ship and lose the apartment for certain. Or keep the money, delay the inevitable for 1 more month and die slow. At dawn, Tom called Walter. "I'm in. Let's get our boat." The Baltimore Harbor Authority office smelled of bureaucracy and low expectations. Rodriguez, the clerk, was a 60-something man with the expression of someone who'd seen every hustle, heard every lie, and believed none of them. "You guys hear about the Avalon Dawn?" "That's right," Walter confirmed. "You know she's been sitting there 3 years, before that different slips for 40 years. Nobody wants her. Previous owner died in 1983. No next of kin ever claimed her. City just wants her gone. Eyesore for the harbor development imad." Tom filled out forms with hands that shook from more than just withdrawal. Rodriguez noticed but said nothing. He'd seen enough veterans to recognize the signs. "Filing fee is $300. Tom counted out bills, literally his last money. Rodriguez stamped the forms and slid a set of old brass keys across the counter. "Congratulations. You now own the most expensive piece of junk in Baltimore Harbor. Slip 47 far end. Can't miss her. She's the only one on fire." Tom's head snapped up. "On fire," Rodriguez deadpanned. "Not literally, but she might as well be. Good luck, gentlemen. You're gonna need it." The walk to slip 47 took 20 minutes through the industrial heart of Baltimore's harbor. This was the forgotten section where abandoned warehouses looked out on empty lots, and the only sounds were seagulls and distant ship horns. The working vessels occupied the good slips near the entrance. The derelicts got pushed to the margins where they could rot in peace. Slip 47 sat at the absolute end, separated from the functional harbor by chain link fence and neglect. Tom and Walter stood on the weathered dock, looking up at what they just bought for $300 and a prayer. The Avalon Dawn rose from the water like a monument to entropy. 300 feet of rust-streaked hull, her superstructure crumbling, but defiant, her name barely visible through corrosion. She sat low in the water, but level, which meant she wasn't taking on water. Her bones were still good, even if her skin had surrendered to time. Tom stopped breathing. The last time he'd seen this ship, she'd been painted navy gray, and there had been bodies on her deck. Blood on her metal, the screams of dying men echoing through her corridors. "You okay?" Walter's hand steadied him. "Just remembering. We can walk away. Nobody would blame you." Tom looked at the ship that had haunted his nightmares for 43 years. Then he thought about Petrov's last words. "Tell my daughter I love her. Tell Anna her papa was trying to make the world better." "No," Tom said. "We're here. Let's finish what we started." The gangway creaked under their weight, but held. The deck was littered with debris, rainwater pooling in depressions where metal had warped. But underneath the decay, Tom could see the ship he'd known. The placement of cargo hatches. The configuration of the superstructure. This was Meridian Star, wearing a different name in 4 decades of neglect. They made their way to the bridge. The wheelhouse windows were filmed with grime, but through them, Tom could see navigation equipment frozen in 1983. Charts still pinned to plotting tables. A coffee cup on the captain's console, as if its owner had just stepped away. Tom found himself standing at the captain's chair. Morrison's chair. He couldn't sit in it. That would be sacrilege. Captain E.J. Morrison had been 52 years old in 1983, a career Navy man who treated his crew like family. He'd taken a liking to young Tom, teaching him about honor and duty over midnight coffee in this very bridge. "A ship is trust," Morrison had said, "between captain and crew, between crew and mission. You break that trust, you're nothing." Morrison had kept his trust even when it killed him. Tom whispered to the empty chair, "I'm sorry, Captain. I let you down." "He wouldn't blame you," Walter said. "Morrison knew the risks. That doesn't make it right." They spent hours searching the upper decks looking for anything unusual. Walter moved with purpose, checking places only someone with his security clearance would know to look. Tom followed his welder's eye, noting structural details, welding marks, modifications that didn't match standard Navy specifications. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Walter paused at a quarter wall. His fingers traced paint that was slightly different in shade, barely noticeable unless you knew what to look for. "Tom, check this out." The wall section was newer than the surrounding structure, painted to match, but not quite perfectly. Most telling, it was held in place with screws instead of welds. Walter produced a multi-tool and began removing screws. The panel came away easily, revealing a narrow space behind the false wall. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth that had protected it for 4 decades, was a leather-bound book. Tom lifted it carefully. The cover was embossed with gold lettering, faded but legible. "Captain's Personal Log, E.J. Morrison, Master." "Jesus," Walter breathed. Morrison's personal log, not the official one the Navy would have confiscated, his real thoughts. Tom opened the book with shaking hands. The pages were yellowed but intact, protected by the oiled cloth and the seal compartment. Morrison's handwriting was precise, the product of a generation that took pride in penmanship. The early entries were routine. Weather observations, navigation notes, crew performance reviews. Then the tone changed. October 10th, 1983. Received sealed orders from Norfolk Station. Previous manifest superseded. We're now a special operations support vessel. IA designate. Crew briefed on need to know only. I don't like this. Too many secrets, not enough trust. Tom's throat tightened. He flipped forward, finding October 12th. Passenger came aboard 0300 hours. Soviet diplomat named Petrov. Defecting with intelligence package. Poor man looks terrified. Keeps talking about his daughter. "Anna, Bashi," he says. "She's only 7. She has to be safe. I promised him we'd get him to safety. God, I hope I can keep that promise." October 14th. Changed course per sealed orders. Someone in CIA doesn't trust standard protocols. Petrov thinks there's a leak. Says the KGB knows he's defecting. He's hiding something in the ship. Won't tell me where. Says only my daughter should find it. What the hell does that mean? The final entry was dated October 15th, 1983. Tom's vision blurred as he read Morrison's last words. 0130 hours. Petrov was right. Soviet submarine surfaced 2 miles astern. We're being followed. I've ordered emergency speed, but we can't outrun them. Petrov is implementing what he calls final protocols. He gave me a letter, said, if I don't make it, give this to Anna when she's old enough to understand. I promised. 0200 hours, they're boarding. I can hear them cutting through Hull. Petrov just told me something. The evidence isn't in my pouch. That's a decoy. The real evidence is hidden where only Anna would think to look. Tell her Papa's music box. I don't know what that means. Gunfire on deck. This is Captain E.J. Morrison signing off. If someone finds this, Petrov was a hero, and my crew died with honor. Tell their families. The entry ended. A dark stain marked the final page. Blood, 43 years old. Tom closed the log, unable to speak. Walter's face was wet with tears he didn't bother hiding. Papa's music box, Walter finally said. That's the clue. Petrov hid the real evidence somewhere connected to a music box. His daughter would know, Tom managed. We need to find Anna Petrov, if she's still alive. They were interrupted by the sound of a car engine. Tom moved to a porthole and looked out at the parking lot. A black Cadillac sedan sat where no car had been before, engine running, tinted windows reflecting nothing. We've got company, Tom said. Walter joined him at the window. They watched as the Cadillac's window rolled down slightly. In the dying light, Tom caught a glimpse of sunglasses and something else. A camera lens pointed directly at the ship. Someone's watching us, Walter said. Someone who knows we're here and knows what we're looking for. How is that possible? We just found the log. Because whoever leaked Petrov's extraction in 1983 has been watching this ship for 43 years, waiting for someone to dig too deep. Tom's phone rang, the sound jarring in the quiet bridge. Unknown number. His finger hesitated over the decline button, but something made him answer. Mr. Thomas Brennan. The voice was cultured, elderly, carrying authority like a weapon. Or should I say, welder third class, Brennan. Who is this? My name is Harrison Blake. I believe we met briefly in 1983, though you wouldn't remember. I was part of the CIA debriefing team after the Meridian Star incident. Tom's blood went cold. I remember. Good. Then you remember the non-disclosure agreement you signed. It's still in effect, Mr. Brennan. What happened on that ship is still classified even after all these years. People died. They deserve justice. People died to protect national security, and you're about to make a very serious mistake if you continue this investigation. Blake's voice hardened. I know you've acquired the Avalon Dawn. I know you've been researching Viktor Petrov. I know you found Captain Morrison's log. How do you know that? Mr. Brennan, I've been monitoring that ship for 43 years, waiting for someone foolish enough to dig into the past. You have 24 hours to surrender all materials you've found. Deliver them to my representative, and we'll forget this ever happened. And if I don't, Blake's pause carried more menace than any threat. Then I'll remind you that you have a daughter, Sarah Brennan Foster, living at 4521 Pine Street, Seattle, and 2 grandchildren, Emma 12, Lucas 9, beautiful children. Be ashamed if anything happened to disrupt their lives. The line went dead. Tom's hands shook worse than they had all day, the phone nearly slipping from his grip. Walter took it from him, reading the tension in every line of Tom's body. What did he say? He threatened Sarah. He threatened my grandchildren. The rage that followed was clean and cold, burning away the fog of alcohol and self-pity that had clouded Tom's mind for years. This man, this Harrison Blake, had just crossed the only line that mattered. We need to get out of here, Walter said, already moving. If Blake knows we found the log, he'll send people to take it by force. They were halfway to the gangway when Tom felt it. The chest pain sharp and sudden. The shortness of breath. The crushing weight of 43 years of guilt and 18 months of grief and 4 decades of alcohol abuse all coming due at once. He collapsed against a bulkhead, gasping. Walter caught him, easing him down. Tom, stay with me. Can't breathe. Walter, I can't. 911, what's your emergency? Walter's voice seemed distant, filtered through cotton and panic. Tom's vision grayed at the edges. The ship around him dissolved, replaced by memories. Petrov's face, Morrison's blood, the screaming that never stopped. Paramedics arrived in minutes, their efficiency a blur of oxygen masks and IV lines and questions Tom couldn't answer. They loaded him onto a gurney, and the last thing he saw before the ambulance doors closed was the Avalon dawn rising against the darkening sky. A ghost ship, a tomb, a promise he had failed to keep. "We're losing him," someone said. Tom closed his eyes and waited for darkness. Tom woke to the antiseptic smell of the VA hospital and the steady beep of monitors tracking a heart that had decided against all odds to keep beating. Dr. Patel stood at the foot of the bed reading charts with the expression of a man who'd seen this movie too many times and knew how it ended. "Welcome back, Tom. You gave us quite a scare." Tom's throat felt like sandpaper. "What happened?" "Panic attack compounded by acute alcohol withdrawal. Your blood alcohol level was still elevated when the paramedics brought you in. Combined with the stress you were under, your body decided to shut down." Patel pulled a chair close, his voice dropping to the brutal honesty reserved for patients who needed to hear truth more than comfort. "I'm going to be blunt because we're running out of time. You're an alcoholic with PTSD and severe anxiety. You're trying to handle all of it with whiskey, and it's killing you. 6 months, Tom, maybe less. That's what you have left if you don't change." "I'm trying to stop." "Trying isn't enough. You need actual help. Inpatient rehab, 30 days minimum." Tom thought of the Avalon dawn of Morrison's log hidden in Walter's possession of Blake's threats against Sarah and the grandchildren he'd never met. "I can't. I have something I need to do. More important than your life." The answer came without hesitation. "Yes." Patel shook his head, the disappointment of a physician who'd learned that some patients chose their demons over salvation. "Then you're going to die doing it. Is that really how you want this to end?" Before Tom could answer, the door opened. Walter Pike entered, moving with the careful deliberation of a man carrying secrets too heavy to drop. He waited until Patel left, then pulled the chair closer. "We've known each other 45 years, Walter began. "I watched you go from a promising young sailor to a broken old man, and I let it happen because I was dealing with my own demons. But this is your last chance, Tom. Your actual last chance." "I know. Do you?" "Because from where I'm sitting, you're choosing guilt over life. You think drinking yourself to death honors Petrov. Honors Morrison. It doesn't. It just adds your name to the list of casualties from that night." Tom stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the stains. "What am I supposed to do, Walt? I can't just flip a switch and be sober. It doesn't work that way." "No, it doesn't. It's hard. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. But you can do hard things. You survived October 15th, 1983. You can survive this." Walter leaned forward, his voice dropping to the intensity of a battlefield order. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to let the doctors treat your withdrawal properly. 72 hours of medical detox. It's going to be hell, but you're going to endure it, and then you're going to help me finish what we started." "What about Blake's deadline?" "I handled it. Called in a favor from Admiral Prescott and an old Navy buddy who works Senate Intelligence Oversight. Told him about a Cold War cover-up involving a CIA officer who betrayed a Soviet defector. Prescott's opening an inquiry. I sent him copies of Morrison's log. Blake's backed off for now, but he's just regrouping." The 72 hours that followed confirmed that hell was real and located inside Tom's own body. The shakes became convulsions. Nausea gave way to hallucinations. He saw Morrison's face in the ceiling tiles, heard Petrov's last words in the ventilation system. Sweat soaked through hospital gowns faster than the nurses could replace them. Walter visited every day, sitting in silent witness. On the second day, when Tom begged for just one drink to take the edge off, Walter's response was merciless. "No, you're going to feel every second of this. You're going to remember what alcohol costs, and you're never going to forget." On the third day, Tom's daughter called. Walter had contacted her, explained the situation with brutal honesty. Sarah's voice on the speakerphone carried 15 years of accumulated hurt. "Dad." "Hi, honey." Tom's voice cracked. Uncle Walt says you're in the hospital, that you're trying to get sober. Yeah, 3 days now. Silence stretched between Baltimore and Seattle, 3,000 miles of disappointment and broken promises. Then Sarah spoke her words careful as a bomb defusal. You've said that before. I know, and I failed every time. But this time is different. Why, what's changed? Tom looked at Walter, at the man who'd pulled him from the water 43 years ago and was pulling him from a different kind of drowning now. I found something, someone really, a man who dies trying to protect his daughter. And I realized I've been so busy feeling sorry for myself that I forgot I still have a daughter and grandkids I've never met. I don't want to die without trying to fix that. The pause lasted an eternity. When Sarah finally spoke, her voice was soft. Emma asked about you, about what you did in the Navy. What did you tell her? That you served, that you were young, that war changed you. Another pause. Would you be willing to tell her more? Not now, not until you prove you can stay sober. But someday, I'd like that more than anything. Then stay alive, Dad. That's all I'm asking. Just stay alive. After the call ended, Tom cried for the first time since Margaret's funeral. Not from withdrawal, not from pain, but from something that felt dangerously close to hope. Dr. Patel released Tom on day 4 with a prescription for anti-craving medication, a referral to AA meetings, and the grim certainty of a physician who'd learned not to bet on miracles. Tom walked out of the hospital into November cold that felt clean after the recycled air of the ward. Walter waited in the parking lot, engine running, heat blasting. How do you feel? Like I got hit by a truck, backed over twice, then set on fire. Good. Means you're alive. Walter pulled into traffic. We need to talk about our next move. Blake's quiet for now, but he's not done. And we still need to find Anna Petrov. If she's alive, she deserves to know what her father died protecting. How do we find her? It's been 43 years. We start with research. I know a librarian who specializes in Cold War history. The Enoch Pratt Free Library occupied a grand building in downtown Baltimore, its reading rooms filled with the quiet intensity of people seeking knowledge instead of distraction. Ruth Martinez, the head research librarian, was a silver-haired woman in her late 50s with the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent her life finding truth in documents others overlooked. Walter made introductions. Ruth, this is Tom Brennan. We need help researching a Cold War incident from 1983. Ruth's interest sharpened. What kind of incident? Tom placed Morrison's log on her desk, the leather worn but intact. The kind that was classified for 43 years. She handled it with archivist reverence, reading select passages with growing fascination. This is authentic period material. Where did you find it? On a ship I just acquired, the Avalon Dawn. Ruth's eyebrows rose. The ghost ship you actually claimed her. I heard someone finally took that old wreck. She opened the log to the final entry. You're looking for information about this Victor Petrov and his daughter, Anna. Anything you can find. Ruth led them to a computer terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. 45 minutes of cross-referencing databases. Cold War archives, State Department records, and Washington Post historical files yielded a story that had been deliberately buried. Victor Petrov, Ruth read from her notes. Soviet Cultural Attaché, D.C. Embassy, 1981 to 1983. Requested asylum, October 12, 1983. Disappeared October 15th, same date as your ship incident. Official record says presumed dead body never recovered. She pulled up another document. His daughter Anna was reported killed in Moscow after his defection. KGB reprisal against family members. Obituary in Pravda lists it as a tragic accident. She would have been 7 years old. Tom's chest tightened. They'd been too late. Anna had died as a child, never knowing her father had tried to save her. But Ruth wasn't finished. However, there's a contradiction in the immigration records. She brought up a different database. 1985, 2 years after Petrov's death. Anna White, age 9, arrived from Finland with her grandmother, Natasha White. Ages match. Obvious Americanization of a Russian surname, and they settled in Baltimore. Walter leaned forward. She's been here the whole time. If this is the same person, there's more. Anna White now. Anna Whitmore works for the State Department, Russian language specialist. Based in D.C., but maintains a residence in Baltimore. Address is 2847 Charles Street. Tom stared at the screen, hardly believing. Petrov's daughter was alive, had been alive this entire time 15 minutes from where they sat. We need to contact her. Not yet, Walter cautioned. We don't have enough. Morrison's log mentions a music box. We need to find what Petrov hid before we approach his daughter. Otherwise, we're just two old men with a story. They returned to the Avalon dawn as afternoon shadows lengthened across the harbor. The black Cadillac was gone from the parking lot, but Tom had no illusions they weren't being watched. Blake had resources, patience, and 43 years of practice covering his tracks. The ship waited in silence, her rust-streaked hull catching the last sunlight. Tom and Walter descended to the crew quarters, searching with systematic thoroughness. Personal effects remained where sailors had left them on that final night. Photos of families, letters never sent, a wedding ring belonging to a man named Rodriguez that Tom remembered from the crew manifest. Walter found it in the officers' mess, hidden behind a panel that bore the same telltale signs as the one concealing Morrison's log. Ship's personnel files complete records of everyone aboard on October 15, 1983. Tom's own file was there. Thomas Brennan Welder, 3rd class, age 21. His service photo showed a young man with hope, still intact, wearing a Navy uniform with pride. Tom stared at his younger self and barely recognized him. Also in the files was a civilian passenger manifest. Viktor Petrov's name, emergency contact information for Anna and her grandmother in Moscow, and a notation under personal effects. One small leather valise, one diplomatic pouch, one carved wooden music box, personal item. Music box, Tom breathed. It was an actual object, not a metaphor. Morrison said only Anna would think to look, Walter reminded him. Where would a 7-year-old girl look for her father's precious things? Tom thought of Sarah at 7, the way children understood the world through emotion rather than logic. Somewhere warm, personal, not a filing cabinet or a safe. They spent the next hour searching Petrov's passenger cabin, a small space on the officer's deck with a bunk desk and locker. Nothing. The cabin had been stripped clean decades ago. Tom sat on the bunk, frustrated. Then his gaze fell on the headboard, an ornate piece of carved wood that seemed too decorative for a Navy auxiliary vessel. His fingers traced the carving, feeling for inconsistencies. There, a slight gap where the wood met the wall. Walter helped me remove this headboard. It took 10 minutes in Walter's multi-tool, but the headboard finally came free. Behind it, in a cavity perfectly sized for the object, sat a wooden music box. Tom lifted it with trembling hands. The craftsmanship was exquisite Russian design with intricate carving. On the bottom, an inscription in Cyrillic script. Walter translated, "To Anna with all Papa's love, may you always hear beauty." The winding mechanism still worked after 43 years. Tom turned the key and the delicate notes of Swan Lake filled the cabin. Tchaikovsky played on a music box that had been silent since 1983, waiting for someone to release its song. Inside, beneath the mechanism, Tom found a false bottom. Prying it carefully revealed a microfilm reel, smaller than a quarter, and a folded letter in paper yellowed, but the Russian writing still legible. "We found it," Walter said, his voice thick. "We actually found it." Tom's phone rang. Unknown number again. He knew before answering who it would be. "Mr. Brennan?" Harrison Blake's voice carried the cold satisfaction of a man who held all the cards. "I trust you've recovered from your little health scare." "What do you want, Blake?" "I want you to understand something. The materials you found on that ship are stolen Soviet property. More importantly, they represent a national security risk that cannot be allowed to surface. I'm offering you one final opportunity to do the right thing." "The right thing, you mean cover up murder?" "I mean prevent unnecessary damage to international relations and to families who had nothing to do with Cold War operations." Blake's voice hardened. "Meet me tomorrow night, Fort McHenry, 10 p.m. Bring everything you've found. In exchange, I'll ensure your daughter and grandchildren are never bothered again. Refuse, and I'll make certain that Sarah Brennan Foster's teaching career ends in scandal. That Emma and Lucas grow up knowing their grandfather was a traitor who sold classified materials." "You son of a bitch. I'm a patriot who's protected American interests for 60 years. Come alone, Mr. Brannan, and come prepared to make the smart choice." The line went dead. Tom looked at Walter, seeing his own fury reflected in his friend's eyes. He's bluffing, Walter said. Blake's desperate. If he had real power, he wouldn't be making threats. What if he's not bluffing? What if he really can hurt Sarah? Then we make sure the evidence gets out before he can act. We need to get this microfilm to Anna Petrov. Tonight. They were preparing to leave when Tom noticed the ship's lights flicker. The Avalon Dawn had been without power for 43 years. Electrical systems, dead generators cold. Yet somewhere in her hull, something had activated. That's impossible, Walter said. Heavy footsteps sounded on the deck above. Multiple people moving with military precision. A voice called down in accented English. Gentlemen, we know you're aboard. Please come out peacefully. We only want the materials you found. Tom and Walter exchanged glances. Not American voices, not government agents. Russian, Walter confirmed. Blake must have called in old contacts. 4 men descended to the crew deck tactical gear, without insignia, weapons drawn but not pointed. The leader was 40-something with cold eyes and the bearing of someone trained in violence from childhood. He smiled without warmth. My name is not important. What is important is that you have taken something that belongs to the Russian Federation, the music box and its contents. You will give them to us now. They belong to Viktor Petrov, Tom said. He died trying to keep them from people like you. Viktor Petrov was a traitor who stole state secrets. What he took belongs to Russia. You are old men. We are professionals. Don't make this harder than necessary. Walter's hand moved toward the concealed pistol Tom hadn't known he was carrying. The Russian's eyes tracked the movement. I wouldn't. We have you outnumbered and outgunned. This can end peacefully or it can end badly. The choice is yours. How did you even know we found it? Tom asked, buying time. Mr. Blake is very cooperative when properly motivated. He told us about your search in exchange for certain assurances. Now the music box. Final warning. Walter threw his flashlight at the leader, the sudden movement creating a split-second distraction. Run! They bolted for the engine room, gunfire erupting behind them. Bullets sparked off bulkheads, the Russians shooting to wound rather than kill. They wanted the music box intact. Tom's 62-year-old body protested every step, his recently detoxed system flooding with adrenaline. Walter led them through the maze of corridors he'd memorized decades ago, but the Russians were younger, faster, professional. They reached the engine room and the maintenance hatch that led to the hull, the same escape route Tom had used in 1983. Walter grabbed him. I'll hold them off. You take the music box and go. I'm not leaving you. Yes, you are. This is my redemption, Tom. I let the crew die in 8-3. I'm not letting Petrov's legacy die now. Walter pressed a waterproof bag into Tom's hands. Put the music box in this. Swim to shore. Find Anna Petrov. Give her what her father left. Walter, please. Go. Walter shoved him toward the hatch. Tom dropped through into Chesapeake Bay, the November water a shock of cold that drove the air from his lungs. He surfaced, gasping, clutching the waterproof bag. Above, gunfire erupted. Walter's voice defiant to the end. Come on, you Russian bastards! More gunfire. Then terrible silence. Tom swam. Every stroke was agony, his shoulder screaming from old injury, hypothermia setting in within minutes. The shore was 200 yards away, might as well have been 200 miles. His vision blurred, coordination failing. But he kept moving because Walter had bought this chance with his life, and Tom would not waste it. He thought of Sarah, of Emma and Lucas, of Petrov's last words and Morrison's sacrifice and Walter's final stand. So many ghosts demanding he survive. Tom dragged himself onto rocky beach and collapsed, body shutting down from cold. He managed to pull the waterproof bag close before darkness took him. Voices penetrated the phone, hands lifting him. Warmth wrapping around frozen limbs. Tom surfaced to consciousness in a room he didn't recognize. Dry clothes, blankets, the blessed heat of survival. A woman sat beside him, dark hair, intelligent eyes that held decades of searching. Her face was older, but carried echoes of a 7-year-old girl in a photograph. Anna, Tom's voice barely worked. Anna Whitmore, she confirmed. Formerly Anna Petrova, and you're Thomas Brennan, the welder from my father's ship. How did you find me? I've been monitoring the Avalon Dawn for years. waiting for someone to claim her. When you and Walter started searching, I followed your progress, protected you from Blake's surveillance when I could. When I saw you swim from the ship, I knew something had gone wrong. My security team pulled you from the water. Tom's panic cut through the fog. Walter, he's still on the ship. They were shooting. Anna's face was grave. The ship is on fire. Russian agents said it after they couldn't find what they wanted. My team is en route, but Tom the Avalon Dawn is burning. Walter. Tom tried to stand failed. He sacrificed himself so I could escape. Just like Morrison. Just like your father. Everyone keeps dying while I survive. Then make their sacrifice mean something. Anna's voice was firm but kind. Did you get the music box? Tom looked around, found the waterproof bag on a nearby table. Anna opened it with shaking hands, lifting out the carved wooden box she recognized from childhood. I remember this, she whispered. Papa used to play it for me before bed. She wound the mechanism. Swan Lake filled the room and Anna's tears came silently. When the song ended, she found the false bottom with the instinct of someone who'd known her father's tricks. The microfilm and letter emerged into light for the first time in 43 years. Anna unfolded the letter reading words written in Russian by a father to a daughter he'd never see grow up. Her hands trembled, but she read aloud, translating as she went. My dearest Anna, if you are reading this, then I did not survive to see you grow up. I am so sorry, my little one. Know that every choice I made for you. The microfilm contains evidence of Operation Nightfall, a Soviet plan to destroy America using corrupted officials. I could not let this happen. Not when it would hurt so many innocent people. People like you. I know you will be angry with me for leaving, for choosing duty over staying with you. But understand, if I had stayed silent, you would have grown up in a world of ashes. I also must tell you about a man named Harrison Blake. He is a CIA officer who pretended to help me, but he was paid by KGB to betray me. He is the reason I will not come home to you. The evidence on this microfilm will prove his treachery. But more importantly, it will prove that I did not betray Russia. I tried to save humanity. Be strong, my Anna. Be brave. Be kind. And know that your papa loved you more than all the stars in the sky. When you hear Swan Lake, remember I am with you. Always, your loving Papa Victor. Anna clutched the letter to her chest, 43 years of questions finally answered. Tom gave her time, understanding that some grief needed silence. Finally, Anna looked up. All my life I wondered if he loved me. If I was just an obligation he couldn't escape. Now I know. He loved you more than life itself, Tom said. That's why he did all of this. Anna's phone rang. She answered, listened, then closed her eyes in relief. Walter's alive. He's wounded but alive. My security team got to him before the fire spread. Tom sagged with relief so profound it hurt. Over the next hours, Anna's team analyzed the microfilm using equipment that would have seemed like science fiction in 1983. The documents projected onto the wall told a story of treason and near apocalypse. Operation Nightfall. Scheduled implementation March 15, 1984. 12 compromised American officials programmed to activate simultaneously sabotaging defense systems to mimic a Soviet first strike. The goal was triggering a U.S. nuclear response based on false data. Mutual assured destruction disguised as American incompetence. The list of American assets made Tom sick. Names, positions, payment records. Including Harrison Blake C. RA Operations recruited 1979. Codename Patriot. Total payments, $2.3 million over 4 years. Photographic evidence showed Blake meeting with KGB officers. Bank records traced Soviet money to accounts in Blake's name. Communications intercepts included one that froze Tom's blood. The defector has become a liability. Eliminate him and destroy all evidence. Blake's order, Blake's signature, Blake's treason. This is enough to destroy him, Anna said, to rewrite 43 years of lies. Can we use it? Tom asked. Or will Blake claim it's forged? He'll claim anything. That's why we need him to confess, on record. Undeniable. Anna's expression turned calculating. Blake thinks the microfilm burned with the ship. He thinks he's safe. We use that. You contact him, pretend to be broken and desperate. Offer to sell your silence. Blake's arrogant enough to believe it. If he suspects a trap, he'll kill me. That's why my team will be covering you. The second Blake threatens you, we move in. Tom thought about Sarah and the grandchildren, about Walter recovering in a hospital bed, about Petrov's 43-year wait for justice. Okay, let's take this bastard down. The night before meeting Harrison Blake, Tom stood alone in Anna's safe house, staring at his phone. Sarah's contact information glowed on the screen, 3,000 miles of distance and 15 years of disappointment compressed into 10 digits. His finger hovered over the call button, paralyzed by the weight of everything he needed to say and no idea how to begin. He pressed call. Sarah answered on the third ring, her voice carrying the wariness of someone who'd been disappointed too many times. Dad, it's midnight here. I know, I'm sorry, I just needed to hear your voice. A pause heavy with unspoken questions. Are you okay? You sound different. I'm sober. 7 days now, and tomorrow I have to do something that might be dangerous. What, Dad? What are you involved in? Tom looked at the music box sitting on the table. 43 years of secrets waiting to be released. Something I should have done a long time ago, standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. You're scaring me. I don't mean to. I just wanted to tell you that I love you. And I'm sorry for everything, for not being there when you needed me, for letting the bottle matter more than you, for missing so much of your life. His voice cracked. If something happens tomorrow, I need you to know that my last thoughts were of you and Emma and Lucas. Don't talk like that. Sarah's fear bled through the phone. Don't you dare die, Thomas Brennan. You don't get to walk back into my life and then leave again. You hear me? I hear you. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise. I love you, Sarah. I love you too, Dad. Her voice softened with something that might have been hope. Please come back. After the call ended, Tom sat in silence holding his wedding ring. Margaret's face smiled from the photo he now carried in his wallet, no longer hidden away in shame. What do you think, Maggie? He whispered. Am I doing the right thing? Her voice came back in memory, clear as the day she'd said it. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the right thing anyway. Fort McHenry stood against the night sky, the historic fort where the national anthem had been born, now hosting a very different kind of battle. Tom arrived 15 minutes early, Anna's surveillance team already positioned in the shadows. The hidden camera in his shirt button felt like a lead weight. The audio recorder in his watch ticked away seconds that felt like hours. At precisely 10 o'clock, headlights cut through the darkness. A black town car with diplomatic plates pulled into the lot. Harrison Blake emerged, and Tom got his first clear look at the man who'd haunted his nightmares for 43 years. Blake was 84, but carried himself like a man 20 years younger. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that cost more than Tom's monthly pension. His eyes held the cold calculation of someone who'd spent 6 decades making decisions that destroyed lives and never lost a night's sleep over it. He wasn't alone. Yuri Volkov, the Russian operative from the ship, stood beside him like a loyal hound. You brought him. Tom's voice was steady despite the fear coiling in his gut. Mr. Volkov is my security consultant, Blake said smoothly, ensuring our transaction goes smoothly. Volkov smiled without warmth. Hello again, Mr. Brennan. Unfortunate about your friend Walter. How is he recovering? The mention of Walter sent rage through Tom's veins, but he forced it down. Stay calm. Get the confession. I want this over with. Blake produced an RF detector, scanning Tom for recording devices. The equipment Anna's team had provided was sophisticated enough to evade detection, military-grade technology that didn't exist in Blake's Cold War toolkit. Satisfied, Blake pocketed the detector. Good. You followed instructions. Let's discuss terms. You mentioned $500,000 for your silence. That's right. Cash untraceable. Blake laughed, the sound devoid of humor. You overestimate your value, Mr. Brennan. I'm offering $100,000. Take it or leave it. That's insulting. It's more than a washed-up drunk deserves. You have no leverage. The music box burned with the ship. The evidence is gone. Your testimony is worthless. The ravings of an alcoholic with PTSD. Who's going to believe you? Tom let desperation creep into his voice, not entirely an act. I made copies of Morrison's log, sent them to journalist friends with instructions to publish if something happens to me. Blake's composure cracked. He snatched Tom's phone, scrolling through photos of log pages Tom had staged specifically for this moment. Blake's face went pale as he read Morrison's words, his own name appearing in the captain's final entry. "Where are the originals?" "Safe, where you'll never find them unless we make a deal." Blake paced, his mind visible, working through options and contingencies. Volkov whispered something in Russian. Anna's translator would later reveal the words, "We should kill him now." Blake responded in Russian, "Not yet. He might be telling the truth." Turning back to Tom, Blake's mask of civility slipped entirely. "New offer, 250,000. You give me the log originals and you disappear. Permanently. Leave the country. Never contact your daughter again. Live out your days somewhere we can't reach you. You want me to abandon my family after everything you've done. I've done what was necessary to protect American interests. You sold out to the KGB for money?" Tom's rage broke through. "You got 35 men killed. You almost started a nuclear war." Blake's eyes went cold as winter steel. "And I stopped the war by making sure certain information never reached the wrong people. You think Petrov was a hero? He was a fanatic with stolen secrets. If his evidence had become public, it would have destabilized the entire Cold War balance. Soviet hardliners would have purged their compromised agents. American hardliners would have demanded retaliation. We would have been at the brink. So you killed him." "I had him killed, yes." The admission came easily, arrogance overriding caution. "I tipped off the KGB to Petrov's extraction route. I ensured his intelligence package would be lost. And I've spent 43 years making sure it stayed lost." Tom pushed harder, needing every detail on record. "And the crew, Morrison, the sailor, so collateral damage, unfortunate but necessary. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And me, Walter, we were just supposed to die too. You were supposed to keep your mouth shut. I gave you ND, as fresh starts, the chance to move on. But you couldn't let it go." Volkov's patience snapped. He drew his pistol, aiming at Tom's chest. "Enough talking. Kill him. We search his apartment, his car. We find the log, or we don't, but he dies tonight." "Wait." Blake held up a hand. "The log is important." "Fuck the log. He's become a liability, just like Petrov." Volkov's finger tightened on the trigger. "Any last words, old man?" Tom hit the panic button, hidden in his belt buckle, praying Anna's team was in position. "Yeah, you lose." Spotlights flooded the area from the hidden positions. Anna's voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "Drop your weapon, FB. You are surrounded." Volkov spun, firing at the lights. Return fire struck his shoulder, spinning him to the ground. Blake tried to run, but Anna's agents emerged from the shadows, tackling him before he made 3 steps. Blake struggled, his composure shattered. "You can't do this. I have diplomatic immunity." Anna stepped into the light, and Blake's face went slack with shock. I heard you were dead. Like my father, like the truth." Anna held up her phone, the audio and video from Tom's hidden devices, playing back Blake's confession in perfect clarity. "You just admitted to treason, conspiracy, and murder. On U.S. soil, to a federal witness. That recording is inadmissible in court. You know that. Maybe, but not in the press, and not in the court of public opinion." Anna's smile was cold. "You're finished, Blake." Blake's defiance crumbled into desperate bargaining. "My son, Senator Blake, he had nothing to do with this. He's innocent." "I know. That's why we're offering you a deal. Cooperate fully. Testify against every remaining Soviet asset you know. Give us names, operations, everything. And we keep your son's name out of it. He can resign, quietly claim health reasons, preserve some dignity. If I do that, Russia will kill me in prison. Then you better hope American prisons are secure, because the alternative is lethal injection for treason." Blake sagged in the agent's grip, 43 years of carefully constructed lies collapsing in a single night. As they led him to a waiting vehicle, he looked back at Tom one final time. "You ruined my life." Tom met his eyes without flinching. "No, sir. You did that yourself. I just made sure everyone knew about it." The trial of United States versus Harrison Blake began 6 months later in a federal courthouse packed with media, historians, and families of the Meridian Star crew. Tom sat in the gallery beside Walter, who'd recovered from his wounds, but now walked with a permanent limp, a cane replacing the agility of his youth. The prosecution called Tom on day 3. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, then faced the jury with the calm of a man who'd already survived worse than a courtroom. Anna, serving as special prosecutor, walked him through October 15, 1983. Every detail: the attack, Petrov's death, Blake's threats, 43 years of silence purchased with fear. Tom's voice never wavered, even when describing the worst moments. The jury listened with rapt attention, some with tears in their eyes. The defense attorneys tried to discredit him. "Mr. Brennan, isn't it true you're an alcoholic?" "I was. I'm sober now, 9 months." "After 40 years of drinking, isn't it possible your memories are distorted by PTSD, by alcohol, by time?" Tom looked directly at the jury. "I remember every detail of that night. The sound of gunfire, the smell of blood. Viktor Petrov's face as he died, asking me to tell his daughter he loved her. Those memories haven't faded. They've haunted me every single day for 43 years." Anna introduced Morrison's log, authenticated by handwriting experts and materials analysis. She played the recording from Fort McHenry, Blake's voice admitting to treason in his own words. The defense objected repeatedly, but the judge allowed the evidence, letting the jury decide its weight. Walter testified on day 5, his military bearing evident, even seated. He described the attack from his underwater perspective, the carnage when he surfaced, the 43 years of guilt and searching for justice. His voice broke only once when describing the crew members he couldn't save. But the bombshell came on day 8. The prosecution called an unexpected witness. The prosecution calls Stephen Blake. Harrison Blake's son walked to the stand, former senator, the man whose life had been built on his father's reputation. He looked 20 years older than his actual age, the weight of revelation having crushed something vital inside him. Anna's questioning was gentle but relentless. "Senator Blake, why are you here?" "To tell the truth about my father, something I should have done years ago." "What truth?" Stephen's hands trembled. "That I knew. Not everything, but enough. In 1982, I was arrested in Moscow. KGB planted drugs, threatened me with 20 years in a Siberian prison. My father was told to work for them or I'd die. I always believed he'd been forced into betrayal, that he had no choice, that he did it to save me. But that's not the whole truth, is it?" "No." Stephen produced a folder of documents. "I found these in my father's safety deposit box after his arrest. Letters between him and his KGB handler, dating back to 1979, 3 years before I was arrested. He was already taking their money, already betraying American assets. My arrest wasn't the cause of his treason. It was insurance to keep him loyal." The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order. Harrison Blake sat frozen, staring at his son with something that might have been betrayal or might have been shame. Stephen looked at his father, tears streaming. "I loved you, Dad. I defended you my whole life, built my career on your legacy, and it was all built on corpses. 35 sailors died so you could keep taking Soviet money. That's not salvation. That's damnation." He handed the documents to Anna, then walked past the defense table without looking at his father. Harrison Blake reached out, whispering, "Son, please." Stephen kept walking. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated 6 hours. Harrison Blake was found guilty on all counts: treason, espionage, conspiracy to commit murder. At sentencing 2 weeks later, the judge showed no mercy. "Harrison Blake, you betrayed your country for money. You caused the deaths of 35 American servicemen. You nearly caused a nuclear war through your treachery. You have shown no remorse. I sentence you to life imprisonment without possibility of parole, to be served at ADX Florence Supermax facility." Blake was led away in chains, an 84-year-old man who would die behind bars. His legacy destroyed his family, shamed his name forever, synonymous with treason. Tom felt no triumph watching Blake's exit, only sadness for the waste of it all. So many lives destroyed, so many years lost. All because one man chose money over honor. 3 months after the verdict, on a perfect August morning, the Avalon Dawn Memorial opened to the public. The ship had been restored to her former glory, her hull gleaming with fresh paint in original Navy colors. Her superstructure rebuilt, her decks transformed into a floating museum dedicated to truth and sacrifice. 500 people attended the opening ceremony. Families of the 35 crew members who died in 1983 now finally knowing the truth. Veterans organizations, Russian embassy representatives, historians and students, media from around the world. Tom stood on the bridge now, his office as co-director of the memorial looking out at the crowd. Beside him stood Anna, the memorial's director, and Walter, who'd insisted on being present despite his doctor's concerns about his health. Sarah had flown in from Seattle with Emma and Lucas. Tom's grandchildren stood on the deck below 12-year-old Emma, reading a memorial plaque while 9-year-old Lucas peppered a Navy veteran with questions about ships. Tom's chest ached with love for these children he was finally getting to know. Anna stepped to the microphone, her voice carrying across the harbor. Welcome to the Avalon Dawn Memorial. This ship represents both the best and worst of humanity. On this deck, men died defending a stranger. Below, a father hid evidence to protect his daughter. For 43 years, truth was buried. Today, we resurrect it. My father, Viktor Petrov, died trying to prevent nuclear war. He died a hero, but for decades, the world was told he was a traitor. Today, we correct that lie. She unveiled a bronze plaque, USS Meridian Star/Avalon Dawn, in memory of Captain E.J. Morrison and 34 crew members who gave their lives October 15, 1983, defending freedom and protecting a hero, and in honor of Viktor Petrov, who chose conscience over country love, over loyalty, truth over lies. Some promises transcend death. Restored 2025 by Thomas Brennan, Walter Pike, and Anna Whitmore. Tom spoke next, his hands gripping the podium to keep them steady. I'm not good at speeches, but I want to tell you about Captain Morrison. He was Navy through and through, believed in honor-duty country. When he knew the Russians were coming, he could have abandoned Petrov, saved his crew. But he didn't, because he'd made a promise, and Morrison kept his promises. Tom's voice caught. I didn't. For 43 years, I stayed silent about what happened on the ship. But Morrison taught me something. It's never too late to do the right thing. This memorial is proof of that. Walter followed, leaning on his cane. I'm the old man who survived. For 43 years, I wondered why. Why me and not the others I think I know now? So I could stand here today and tell you about heroes. Real heroes, not movie heroes. Morrison, who chose duty over life. Petrov, who chose truth over safety. Tom Brennan, who chose redemption over despair. These are the heroes we remember. On this ship, forever. After the ceremony, Tom gave Emma and Lucas a private tour of the memorial. Emma studied every exhibit with her mother's serious intensity, asking questions that showed she understood more than her 12 years suggested. Grandpa, did you really hide while Mr. Petrov died? Tom knelt to her level, meeting her eyes. Yes, I was scared. I was 21 years old, and I watched armed soldiers kill people. I hid because I didn't know what else to do. Mom says being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. Your mom's right, and I'm trying to be brave now, even though it's 43 years late. Emma hugged him suddenly, fiercely. I'm glad you didn't die that night, because then you wouldn't be my grandpa. Lucas tugged at Tom's hand. Can I join the Navy when I grow up like you? Tom looked at this 9-year-old boy who saw heroism where Tom only saw failure. You can be anything you want, Lucas, but whatever you choose, choose honor. That's what matters. As the crowds thinned, Anna found Tom standing at the ship's rail, looking out at the harbor where he'd nearly drowned 6 months ago. There's something I need to tell you, Anna said. Something I haven't shared yet. She pulled out a photo, a young man in his mid-20s holding a baby. The man had Anna's eyes and Petrov's chin. My son, Alexei, Viktor Alexei Petrov. He's 26 now, and this is his daughter, my granddaughter, Sophia. She's 2. Anna's voice softened. My father never got to meet me as an adult, never knew he had a grandson or a great-granddaughter. But because of you, Tom Alexei knows who his grandfather was. Not a traitor, a hero who died trying to save the world. Petrov would be proud of you, Tom said, of the woman you became, the mother you are. He'd be grateful to you for finishing what he started. 1 week later, Walter Pike died peacefully in his sleep at the VA hospital, his body finally surrendering to wounds that had taken 43 years to kill him. Tom sat beside him at the end, holding his friend's hand. Walter's last words were simple. Mission complete. I can rest now. They buried Walter at sea from the Avalon Dawn Navy Honors with a 21-gun salute. Tom scattered his friend's ashes from the same spot where Morrison had died, completing a circle 43 years in the making. Sarah stood beside him, one hand on his shoulder. Emma and Lucas watched solemnly, understanding they were witnessing something important, even if they couldn't fully grasp what. As taps played across the water, Tom whispered to the wind, "See you on the other side, Walt. Save me a spot." A year passed. Tom celebrated 18 months of sobriety, then 2 years. He attended AA meetings, religiously sponsored 3 other veterans struggling with alcoholism, and learned that recovery was a daily choice, not a destination. Sarah and the kids moved to Baltimore. She took a teaching position at the city schools, and Emma volunteered at the memorial every weekend, giving tours with the confidence of someone who'd found her calling. Lucas joined Junior ROTC wearing his uniform with pride that made Tom's chest ache. October 15, 2026 marked the 43rd anniversary of the Meridian Star attack. The memorial held its annual remembrance ceremony, now a tradition. Tom stood at the helm, older but stronger than he'd been a year ago, leading the gathering and reading the names of all 35 crew members. Each name a bell rang. By the end, 35 bells had sounded across Baltimore Harbor. Then silence, profound and respectful. Stephen Blake attended his first visit since his father's trial. He approached Tom hesitantly, carrying the weight of a surname now synonymous with treason. "Mr. Brennan, I wanted to apologize for my father's actions, for the pain he caused. You're not responsible for his choices." "No, but I benefited from them. My whole life was built on blood money." Stephen pulled out a checkbook. "I've established a scholarship fund, $2 million invested to generate annual scholarships, in the names of all 35 crew members, for children of veterans." Tom accepted the gesture, seeing in Stephen's eyes the same desperate need for redemption that had driven his own journey. Some sins couldn't be forgiven, but they could be acknowledged. That was something. Emma read an essay she'd written for school titled "What Heroes Mean." She spoke about Morrison Petrov Walter and her grandfather, about choosing right over easy, about how it's never too late to be brave. The entire crowd stood in ovation when she finished, this 12-year-old girl who understood truth better than most adults. As the ceremony ended and visitors filtered through the memorial, Anna pulled Tom aside to a quiet corner of the deck. "There's someone I want you to meet." A young woman approached, late 20s, carrying a toddler. She had Anna's eyes and Petrov's determined chin. "Tom Brennan, this is my daughter-in-law and my granddaughter, Sophia." The toddler looked at Tom with curiosity. In her small hands, she clutched a wooden music box, the same one Petrov had carved for Anna 43 years ago. "We play it for her every night," Anna's daughter-in-law explained. "Swan Lake. So she knows her great-grandfather through music, even though she'll never meet him." Tom knelt down to Sophia's level. The child smiled, winding the music box. The delicate notes of Tchaikovsky filled the air, the same melody that had been silent for 43 years, until Tom had found it hidden in a ship's headboard. "Your great-grandfather was the bravest man I ever knew." Tom told Sophia, knowing she was too young to understand, but needing to say it anyway. "He died trying to make the world better. And because of him, you get to grow up in peace." That evening, after the crowds left and the memorial closed, Tom stood alone on the Avalon Dawn's deck. Sarah had taken Emma and Lucas home, promising to return for dinner. The harbor was quiet, just the lap of water against hull and the distant cry of gulls. Tom pulled out his phone and scrolled to a video Sarah had sent. Emma and Lucas in their backyard. Emma reading while Lucas built a model ship. Ordinary moments. Precious beyond measure. His other hand touched the wedding ring in his pocket, Margaret's ring that he still carried. The weight of it had changed. No longer an anchor dragging him down, but a reminder that love endured beyond death, beyond mistakes, beyond the years of failure. "We did it, Maggie," Tom whispered. "I came back." Movement at the gangway caught his attention. A man in his 60s, weathered-faced Navy veteran, written in every line of his bearing. He carried flowers. "This the Meridian Star Memorial." "It is. We're closed for the day, but you are welcome to come aboard." The man climbed the gangway, carefully, arthritis visible in his movements. "My brother died on this ship, Michael Rodriguez. He was 24, getting married when he got back to port. His fiancée waited 2 years before she accepted he was never coming home." Tom remembered Rodriguez. The wedding ring he'd found in the crew quarters had belonged to this man's brother. "I served with Michael. He was a good man." "Yeah, he was." The veteran placed the flowers at the memorial plaque. For 43 years, we didn't know what really happened. Government said classified accident, no details. Now we know, now we understand he died a hero. He did, they all did. The man extended his hand. Thank you for bringing the truth to light, for giving us answers, for making sure they're remembered. After the veteran left, Tom sat in Morrison's chair on the bridge, the captain's seat he'd been unable to occupy for so long. It felt right now, not because he'd earned it through heroism, but because he'd earned it through persistence, through choosing day after day to do the hard work of living and remembering and telling the truth. His phone rang. Sarah. Hey, Dad, dinner's ready. Emma made dessert. Well, she tried. It's a little burnt, but don't tell her I said that. Tom smiled, the expression still feeling new after so many years of grimness. I'm on my way. He took one last look around the bridge. Morrison's photo hung on the wall, the captain, forever 52, forever commanding. Petrov's picture beside it, forever 40, forever clutching his daughter's memory. Walter's photo completing the Trinity, forever 78, forever the protector. Tom was 63 now, sober for 2 years, rebuilding relationships he'd thought irretrievably broken. He wasn't a hero, he'd never be a hero, but he was trying, and maybe that was enough. He locked the memorial and walked toward his car, toward dinner with his daughter and grandchildren, toward a life he had almost thrown away. Behind him, the Avalon Dawn sat at her mooring lights, reflecting off her restored hull. No longer a ghost ship, no longer a tomb, a witness, a teacher, a promise kept. Some ships carried cargo, some carried dreams. The Avalon Dawn had carried both, along with the weight of secrets and the burden of truth. And in the end, she delivered exactly what the world needed most. Not treasure, not glory, just the simple, profound proof that it's never too late to choose the right thing. That redemption is possible even at the edge of despair. That love transcends death, and truth, no matter how long buried, will eventually find its way to light. Tom Brennan had spent 43 years running from October 15, 1983. Now he spent every day running toward it, embracing the ghosts, honoring the dead, teaching the living. He'd finally come home, and the Avalon Dawn's silent witness to his journey would make sure that everyone who walked her decks understood some promises. Transcend time, transcend death, transcend even our worst failures. The promise to remember, the promise to honor, the promise to tell the truth no matter the cost. Tom drove toward his daughter's house, toward the grandchildren, waiting with burnt dessert and unconditional love toward a future he'd finally learned to believe in. Behind him, the memorial lights glowed against the gathering dusk, a beacon in Baltimore Harbor, a reminder that even the most broken things could be made whole again. If you were brave enough to try, if you were willing to face the past instead of drowning it, if you remembered that the only direction left when you have lost everything is forward. Tom Brennan had learned that lesson the hard way, but he'd learned it, and that made all the difference.